Okay. We are live this morning and it's Friday, February 25th, and it's the last day before we go on town meeting break. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. And I think we've had some discussions about recycled material with the agency, and Thea's here this morning. Is Senator Perchlik, you have some information for us prior to this, or how are we taking it today, or do I understand?
Yeah. Well, I guess we have to kind of see if anything happened. When I told Jeannie I thought I could do it by Friday, I was being over ambitious. I missed an email from Anthea, and then there's been some back and forth. And so if we want to have a kind of an open discussion about it, but I was hoping we get to a point where we'd all have agreed on some new language, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay, so do you want to have Anthea go through what we have, or how do you want to handle this?
Well, I guess I don't know if Ann or Nick from AOT have anything to say about the stuff I sent last night. And I guess the crux, we haven't really had enough time to go back and forth, and they might have even sent me an email that I haven't seen. But basically, I was looking for a set goal and really focusing on recycling material. The language that they had presented was fine, but I thought it wasn't. It was more of what we already have, which was kind of their point. Like, we don't really need it because we're already being encouraged. It is just more encouraging. And they use the word sustainable building materials. And I didn't know why we'd use that word and not recycled materials. If the goal is to really build the markets for recycling, for using the specific recycled materials. So that's kind of the issue. If you want to hear, we could just
hear
from AOT.
Who would you like to turn to now?
It's up to AOT if it's Ms. Gamble or Mr. Van Berg.
Okay, we have both folks with us this morning. Nicholas or Ann, who would like to proceed?
Good morning, Senator. I'd be happy to jump in.
Okay, go right ahead. Yep.
So, Senator Perchlik, we did receive your email yesterday afternoon with the draft that Anthea had gone through. And we have gone through it, and I apologize we didn't respond yesterday afternoon. But as far as from AOT's standpoint, I think we're good with that draft that Anthea had sent. It seemed like it really did a nice job of incorporating the comments that you had and that we had sent along. So, and I believe you had sent that maybe 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So as far as AOT is concerned, we're good with that draft.
So do we want to hear the draft that Anthea has at this time? Senator Perchlik?
I guess because I also sent them an email that Anthea had sent me a couple days prior. So I'm not sure, but if Anthea's there, maybe she can talk about what she considers the latest language.
Anthea, are you with us this morning?
She is.
Okay. I was muted.
Okay, that's all right. Okay, but yes, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Yes, I think Senator Perchlik said you have the latest or some of it.
So I'm going to pull up what I think is the latest, and then I will tell Ann and Nick what the draft number is, and we can make sure that I am properly going to go through what they think is the latest version.
Thank you.
So what I think is the latest version would be draft 4.1, 2/22/22, 11:30 a.m. And it's got some comments in the sidebar.
Yep.
Okay. Senator Perchlik, that was the Word version that I sent you earlier in the week. I can take off the comments and do a share screen of that if you would like.
Yeah.
It does use sustainable building components though. And I know that you're now saying you don't like that phrase.
Well, I just don't know what it means. What is a sustainable building material?
Well, so I will say that when sustainable building components is being used in this, it says it shall be the state's policy to use sustainable building components, including recycled materials and manufacturing byproducts. So at a minimum, you're saying that it's going to include recycled materials and manufacturing byproducts. You certainly could include a definition of sustainable materials, sustainable building components if you wanted to make sure that you're on the same page with the agency as to what was fully encompassing sustainable building components.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from them. Nick, is there,
Sure.
you guys picked that word rather than recycled material?
Yeah, and I'll just jump in, and that was just in an earlier draft. The finding number 10, it's kind of defines sustainable building components. It says use of sustainable building components such as recycled materials and manufacturing byproducts. So solely the only reason I had used that in replacement of the recycled materials and manufacturing byproducts was just to make it, I guess, read a little nicer. But again, with the thought in mind that, okay, we've defined that here, so now we can sort of use that more efficient language further on. But I really am not opposed to just continuing to say, and I think Anthea's draft does this, it pretty much anywhere now where it says sustainable building components, it also then immediately says recycled materials and manufacturing byproducts. So I think we got it. I think we've covered it.
Okay, and we can, let's just look at the language because just to make sure if you can share it.
Yep. Jeannie gave me sharing access. Thank you, Jeannie. Or sharing privileges rather. So can you see this use of sustainable building components draft 4.1?
Yep.
Okay, so yellow is indicating a change from the last version. So the findings changed slightly in that what was finding 3 and what was finding 5 have now been combined into one. The findings are also now their own section. And the reason why the findings have been made their own section is because instead of having the findings be a subsection in session law, there are now findings in session law and then actual language being added to codified law. And the reason why this draft does that is one of the comments that the agency had made was, well, we already have this language in codified law about using recycled asphalt pavement. We have the language from 2020 Acts and Resolves 121 that's talking about encouraging the use and study of pozzolans. And now we're having this other language in session law. Can we have it all in one place? So this is now going to all be in one place in Title 19. The amended finding 3 is to address a comment that Nick had about just some clarity as to what it was that could be converted into a building component. So this is now saying that at present, recycled glass can be used in these 3 ways. As an aggregate to substitute for virgin or manufactured sand, ground and used as a pozzolan, which can be a partial substitute for Portland cement in a concrete mix design, or converted into a building component. So the recycled glass can be converted into a building component. And then the numbers for the findings are adjusting accordingly. I had a citation error in here. It was not 2021 Acts and Resolves, it was 2020 Acts and Resolves. And no other changings to the findings except for using sustainable building components throughout. This had said sustainable components such as in the earlier version. Section Y is repealing what is related to the recycled asphalt pavement. So in statute 19 VSA section 10C is one of the statement of policy sections. And what this draft does is it takes subsection M out of that statement of policy section, and then it's creating in section Z a new statement of policy section in codified law. It's the statement of policy for sustainable building components and requiring an annual report. It's saying that it's the policy of the state, and this is subsection A in this new section of codified law, that it shall be the state's policy to use sustainable building components, including recycled materials and manufacturing byproducts in all maintenance, construction, and improvement projects within the transportation program. And then Senator Ingalls and Senator Kitchell, this is using some of what you had brought up about wanting to make sure that it was of comparable quality. So it's to be used to the extent that sources of quality sustainable building components are available and the use is consistent with producing transportation assets with the demonstrated evidence of long-term durability. And that's also taking some of the language about recycled asphalt pavement, requiring there to be a comparable quality usage. It's telling the agency in subsection B to define its performance and related specifications and contract bid documents to allow and, as practicable, encourage the use of sustainable building components. Subsection C is re-including what was repealed above in section Y, which is the language about recycled asphalt pavement. This is existing law that recycled asphalt pavement shall be used on all agency paving projects to the extent sources of RAP, the recycled asphalt pavement, of a quality comparable to hot mix asphalt is available, and the agencies shall define paving project specifications and contract bid documents to allow for the use of up to 50% RAP. This is more prescriptive than the balance of the language about the specifications. Again, this is just moving something that's existing law. I would be curious to hear from the agency if they think this language is necessary, or if there are other types of building material, sustainable building components that maybe members of the committee would like to also be addressed the way that the recycled asphalt pavement is. Subsection D, research and testing. This is very similar to the language that is in 2020 Acts and Resolves 121 about the pozzolans. It's telling the agency that it is encouraged to continue researching, testing, and wherever practicable, using sustainable building components, pozzolans, and alternatives to Portland cement as part of the construction specifications for all transportation infrastructure projects. And then it has an annual report. It's coming from the agency in consultation with the Recycled Materials Working Group. It is not a written report. It is an oral report that would be given to the House and Senate Committees on Transportation on the use of sustainable building components in the maintenance, construction, and improvement projects within the transportation program. One key thing that you will not see in this language that you saw in the earlier language is it does not have the tracking requirement, tracking the use of sustainable building components, the recycled materials, or the manufacturing byproducts, or the language that's required to be in the contracts with subcontractors. So those are the two key things that are not included in this language that you saw in what we did the walkthrough of on Tuesday.
The other day, the agency had brought up the word shall in different places. Has the agency got any comments on that?
Senator, I did review it carefully for the word shall, and I think as it's used in this draft that Anthea just went through, I don't personally have any objections there.
Okay, just so that I know, it was a question the other day. I want to make sure we're able to do what we're doing without mandating something that can't happen, or that's always a concern. So any other comments on this language? Yes, Senator Perchley, go right ahead.
Yeah, Nick, do you have any comments to Anthea's point about that old law about the 50% limit on the RAP? Like, I noticed that was put in statutes several years ago, so I don't know if we could update it or correct it or get rid of it or whatever, since we're dealing.
Well, I think so. We did review. I think that it was changed last session. It used to include some additional content. So it was revisited very recently. And I know that the asphalt paving industry has a significant interest in that. So I think it would be easiest path forward to leave it as is. We don't have any objections to how it's currently stated.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Sure, that's it. We have Crosby with us, I think, this morning from Casella, who had weighed in earlier. So I don't know if she's had a chance to look at it or if we have an opportunity to hear if she has any comments on it.
Sure, Cam, are you with us? Yep.
I am. Good morning.
Morning.
The only comment that I just wanted to add was in that section about the RAP, it doesn't really mention how or a plan to use PGA. So could there be some additional language added to that section encouraging the use of PGA as well, up to a certain percentage?
What's PGA again?
The processed glass aggregate that CSWD is making. That would be used in lieu of sand as a sub base.
Does Nick or Ann have
I guess
that?
I just want to make sure that we're encouraging the use of that as well.
Right. I mean, that's why I thought that's why I liked using the word recycled materials, because that was kind of the original goal of going down this path, was to build markets for those kind of products.
Right.
But the language is written so it actually, doesn't it cover that plus other
Right.
things? So it seems like it gives more flexibility and potential, what potentially could be considered, all within the parameters that we have here, that, you know, that it's that there's evidence that it, on its durability, and meets those requirements. So I just wonder.
Yeah, I don't know why you have to single out a single material, because I think you're covering in a broad swoop of, I think the language covers anything that could be deemed recyclable or reused.
Sustainable building, is it the building that causes the concern that that's a limiting factor?
Well,
So,
can
I mean, glass from juice bottles, is that considered sustainable building? You know, I'm just wondering about that term. Sustainable building materials.
I guess if I may,
Go ahead, Senator Chittenden.
I'd be curious to hear from Nick and Ann. Do you interpret this language as being permissive to allow PGA to be used as a material in the roads? Or do you think we need to better clarify and articulate to encourage V-Trans to use the materials?
In my opinion, I think it does a good job of covering PGA, and to Senator Kitchell's point, you know, it sort of paints in broad strokes. So it really covers any recycled material manufacturing byproduct.
And I guess if it's okay, Mr. Chair, that the addition of wrap, you know, we call out the asphalt pavement, recycled asphalt pavement. And that's just because I think that was in statute before. So that was the first kind of recycled material we were starting to use. But the PGA would be as part of the section A part that under the policy. Is that where that would be, Anthea? That's the part that would capture encouraging the use of PGA.
Yeah, so it would be captured in subsection A in the policy, and then presumably in the agency's implementation of it with its performance and related specifications. If they were to address a particular building component, it would be there. And I am in the process of figuring out when subsection M on the recycled asphalt pavement was added. And I can tell you that it happened at some point before 2013, because that's as far as I've made it through the notes. So that has been in codified law for quite a while.
The wrap was, don't you remember, Representative Peasley? That was her big thing, remember? And we kept raising, she had a percentage and we keep raising it.
I think it was added in
maybe it's-
2007.
I think so. Senator Maz and I would probably be the only ones who remember that. Who was going to raise the level on wrap? It was like a new discovery.
Chair Mazza?
Yes, go ahead.
So Ms. Crosby, does that meet your comments as far as like that it's the PGA would be part of the overall types of things that we're trying to get the agency to encourage use when it makes sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think I just got a little thrown off by the wording with the wrap language and the requirement to use the percentage. I didn't know that was an existing law. So.
Okay. Well, with that, Chair, I'm happy with this, and I don't know if you want to see a clean language.
So what do we want to do with this language? You want to put it, where is it going to go? Is it a separate bill, a committee? Yes.
I
Put it in the T-bill.
Put it in the T-bill when it comes over.
So we got a chance to print it, get it all ready to go before, we'll just hang on to it till the T-bill comes over. Is that correct?
Yeah, we might even have time. We'll be in person. We can see an actual printed out version.
Okay, all right, okay, so any other questions about this issue before? Sounds like it's pretty much a done deal unless something happens, but
Then Chittenden has.
yes,
Comment.
I can't see you, go right ahead, yep.
I'm being told as I acclimate to this new role that legislative intent is important. And so I just want to say I support this language because I want to see local markets for the use of this glass aggregate so that we're not shipping it all over the country down to Massachusetts with heavy trucks burning down, burning fossil fuels. So I'm hopeful that this language will enable VTrans to find uses for this recycled material here in Vermont. So I don't know how to get that into the bill, but I'm stating it now because that's my legislative intent.
So if we wanted to, we could work on legislative intent language that could go in addition to the findings. So you could have a finding section, just like section, I think it's F in this draft. And then you could have a section X1 that was legislative intent, saying it is the intent that, et cetera, et cetera. When you're looking at how law is interpreted, you want the law to be interpretable and have there not be ambiguity, looking just at like the four corners of the law. And then looking to legislative intent would be something that would be necessary if there was, for example, litigation about this and you were looking to try and interpret what it was that the intent of the members in passing the law was. So intent sections are not required. They are certainly used in lots of bills. One thing to remember is this is going to be language that's put into a different bill, into the T bill. So you would want your intent language to be specific to these sections. Another tool of statutory interpretation, and it'll be interesting to see with the advent of all of this being on YouTube, is if there was litigation on this statute 20 years from now, is someone going to pull up this YouTube recording and listen up? Senator Perchlik said, it is my intent that, and use that to try and interpret it if there is an argument that the statute is ambiguous. I think a lot of this, though, is going to come to how the agency is interpreting it when they're doing their specifications as required under subsection B, and you have two members of the agency listening to your intent now. So you are conveying it in a number of ways, even if it doesn't end up in the bill.
Maza.
Yes, go right ahead.
I think that you have to be careful with that legislative intent. It brings in more shalls into what you're trying to accomplish, and I think you get a different interpretation of what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Okay, all right. We'll carry on and we'll see the final draft, and we got time to do anything else we want to do to it, but I think we've covered it pretty well this morning, unless something else comes up. Thank you, Anthea. Appreciate it. Thank you, the agency, for your input. And so we'll continue on. All right. Okay, our next item this morning is federal local government transportation programs. We have the Vermont League with us this morning. We're honored to have the Vermont League, Karen Horn and Gwen, both with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Senator.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. We're
Good-
honored to have
Good
you.
morning. We're honored to be here. It's always good to be in the
Is Gwen-
Transportation
Gwen with
Committee.
you? Is Gwen with you?
Pardon?
Is Gwen with you also?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
good morning. There
Yeah,
she is.
Gwen is here.
We see her quite a bit when she's in Montpelier, but yeah, she gives us a hard time. We can.
Yeah, we like to give people a hard time.
Well, that's right. That's right. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing your job, right?
Well,
Okay.
thank you for having us.
Well, thanks for coming. But what would you like to discuss with us this morning?
Well,
You want to
we
turn
would
someone
like to
back to the
discuss.
agency? Yeah.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing, but hopefully my internet is okay.
Okay.
We would like to discuss town program funding. And we understand that even with the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act funds coming to the state of Vermont, the transportation fund is facing a long-term, somewhat dire situation in terms of revenues coming in. But we did want to make a few points to the committee. Overall, the town funds, the town programs are seeing a 2.4% increase over last year. That includes a $14.9 million increase in town highway bridges, which was entirely due to the Federal Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act requiring that those dollars go to local bridges. I know that last year you provided a $3 million one-time increase to town highway aid programs. And that this year the proposal is that you go back to the regular formula increase, less that 3 million one-time funding. And I think that what we would like to suggest to you is that with the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act dollars this year, then it might be an appropriate year to do a second round of one-time funding. We're not asking, because we understand the problem with the transportation fund long-term. We're not asking for an increase in the formula overall or for a long-term commitment to that kind of increase. But the Agency of Transportation's roadway program is going up 38% this year. Municipalities are responsible for 80% of the road network in Vermont, and we never have enough funding to address all the needs that are involved in maintaining that road network. So that's essentially what we're asking for you to consider, some kind of an additional one-time increase for town highway aid. And we mentioned town highway aid because, as you know, it's the most flexible funding that comes from the state to transportation projects. We did, just so you are aware, we did testify yesterday in the House Transportation to the same issue. So I don't know, Gwen, if there's anything else that you would like to add on this particular point, and we're happy to take questions if not.
I'll just add, hello everyone, Gwen Zackoff, League of Cities and Towns. I would just add that, we've been waiting sort of for a little bit more clarity in how the new federal funding would go down to the local level. And obviously the bridges is the most clear area. And it's becoming increasingly clear that that level of transparency or a knowledge of how it's going to be, how the different programs that are in the IIJA are going to impact local governments, or just we might not know anytime soon. So I think we're just looking for support from the legislature to be mindful that municipalities are a part of that package, and we would just appreciate a level of transparency from the Agency of Transportation moving forward, so we can sort of look under the hood and see how those federal monies are being divvied up, and see if there's any way possible moving forward that they can go to some of our local programs. And going back to Karen's request for money being used for the general local aid, because it is the most flexible. I know there's been a little, I wouldn't say pushback, but a little concern that because those programs or that funding doesn't go through any sort of grant applications, and there's perhaps a concern that it's not being used to its best value or ability. I think what I've heard over the past year since that increase, and we appreciate and we thank you for the increase in funding last year and the rise of the statutory minimums, but a lot of our communities, particularly the smaller and more rural communities, have said that the roads that are suffering the most at the local level are the roads that are not touched by those grant programs, and those are essentially class 3 roads. So towns are picking up a lot of, well, pretty much the entire bill for maintenance of those roads. So we feel that yes, we'll take any money you can throw in our direction for our communities, but certainly the most flexible ones would be the general aid money. So just a plug for that. That money is not wasted. It is used for valuable uses, and particularly those rural communities who are having class 3 roads that are just not in the greatest condition. But that's all I
Yeah.
think.
And
We heard good testimony yesterday from Kevin Marcha about the bridge program that affects a lot of towns. Are you aware of that one, right?
yeah, that is the 14.9 million that's
Yeah.
coming from the federal government to
Right.
local governments. And it's required to go to local governments. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good program. I was really impressed yesterday to hear that.
Yeah.
Some of these bridges.
Yeah, we see that as sort of like a catch up to where we should be. You know, it's really unfortunate you see all this money coming through from the federal government, and it's sobering when you realize just how it seems like a lot of money until you actually see how it's implemented. And it's yes, I think there's like somewhere in between 50 or 60-ish bridges that are going to be impacted.
Right.
But again, those are maybe 50 or 60 communities. And there's still a long list of other communities that aren't going to get a slice of that pie, but certainly it's welcome and appreciated.
Oh, yeah, because they would never be rehabilitated without this help, because
No.
they're a lot of money, some of these bridges.
No.
The other thing, aren't towns getting a lot of extra money from the feds under the last grants from, aren't they getting, because I know a couple of my towns said they got a bunch of money from
So yeah, the towns received direct aid from the American Rescue Plan Act.
Yeah.
And we have an ARPA coordination program that's been established with funding from the legislature. And as a result of that, we were able to assure that every town except for one in the state actually accepted that federal direct aid. And they're being asked to use it on a multitude of issues: housing, broadband, upgrades to municipal buildings for HVAC and those kinds of things. So again, it looks like a lot of money until you try to complete a project with it. In a number of towns that are looking at village wastewater systems, the ARPA direct aid would only be a fraction of that. But if I may just mention also that we asked the Appropriations Committee, Senator Kitchell is well aware of this, to consider expanding the ARPA coordination program to assisting towns with accessing some of this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money, because some of the programs that are being stood up, you can apply directly from the local level to the federal government, but there's an awful lot involved in doing that. And you have to make sure that all your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed. And our ARPA coordinator, Katie Buckley's done a fabulous job of that with the ARPA program. And we're hoping that we might expand it to the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act program so that we can take the best advantage of those dollars as well.
questions. Yes, Senator Chittenden, go right ahead.
So I definitely want the monies from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act to get into our roads so that the voters and constituents really see why the government started printing money and can see the benefit over the next 1 or 2 years. Could part of your argument to channel more of this through the municipalities include, and I'm genuinely asking this question, that municipalities have the infrastructure, the capital investments, the machinery, and the capacity to some extent. I mean, it's not like people are sitting around staring at the walls, but when it comes to finding the capacity to put the money in the roadways, they are an existing workforce, the municipalities, and that might be a better way to get those dollars into the pavements so that the people out there see less potholes and better improved roads over the next 2 years. Or are you, as we've heard from many in this committee, it's just really hard to find people. Are municipalities struggling just as hard to have people that can put these dollars into the roads over the next year or so? I'm curious to hear an argument why a municipality would have a better ability of putting the dollars into the roads.
So I think that municipalities, they do have public works departments and road crews that are in place. They are going to be doing the work on the class 3 roads, which the state generally does not do. And that's an awful lot of the roads that Vermonters travel. So from that point of view, yeah, I wouldn't say we have a better ability to get dollars spent, but we have a different focus at the local level, right? We're not going to be looking at class 1 highways. We're going to be looking at the 80% of the road network that's local. Having said that, Senator, we are certainly facing the same kinds of challenges with respect to hiring staff. And I think you can open any newspaper, mostly any day of the week, if you still open newspapers, and see ads for road crew, yeah, and public works staff. It's a challenge right across the state. We can't deny that. We're also concerned that with the rate of inflation, your dollar isn't going to go as far as it would have a couple of years ago.
Quick follow-up.
Yep, right ahead.
I would say, as a city councilor in one of the towns that you represent, I'm looking at the ARPA dollars you mentioned, Senator Maas, and really hoping to get a community pool. So I love some more money to go into the roadways so that I can pitch to the community those dollars to go elsewhere.
A community what? Pool?
A pool. I just wanted to be fully
We have-
transparent in some of my motivations. and where
You
I'm
come out to the lake out here and it's free. Don't cost you a nickel. No, come on out.
do that.
Questions?
I think the lake may be costing South Burlington quite a few nickels with respect to
That's
stormwater.
That's right. There you go. Yes, Senator Ingalls, you have yep, go right ahead.
How are the communities responding to, how are they responding to the monies that they've got coming and the availability of being able to do more projects? Are they being able to spend this money down in a satisfactory way?
You're
So,
talking about the 176 million that went directly to the towns?
Yeah. Well, with that, Senator Kitchell, on top of asking for more money, I mean, are they even able to get to the projects that they need to get to already? And then they're asking for more money. So I just want to make sure that they're able to get through the money that they've gotten before we put on more money to them.
So with respect to the ARPA dollars, we have cautioned municipalities to take their time and be strategic and invest in those kinds of projects that the governor is calling transformational. The projects that have been on your books for a long time that you haven't been able to get to, like village wastewater. So towns have until 2024 to spend those dollars. I've heard about a number of towns that are having public meetings with their constituents about where those dollars should be directed. A few towns that are actually going to be asking voters to vote at a special meeting on the expenditure of those dollars. But they don't need to be spent in the really constrained time frame that the coronavirus relief funds were needed to be spent. So we're hoping they take a little bit more time. Those ARPA dollars are not really focused on transportation issues either. As we mentioned earlier, the focus is on other kinds of projects like water supply or wastewater or housing, promoting, encouraging the development of housing, or addressing the homeless situation, providing upgrades to municipal buildings for ventilation and weatherization and those kinds of things. The list is long. But to your point, Senator, I don't believe a lot of ARPA dollars have actually been spent to date. I will just add that the most recent federal Treasury guidance allows for the first $10 million of your ARPA direct aid to be dedicated to lost revenue at the local level. So there really isn't any town other than Burlington, we think, that would have lost $10 million in revenue during the COVID pandemic. So they can put those dollars toward lost revenue in their general fund and then apply them to budget items that are being voted on Tuesday at town meeting also.
It seems like the towns have gone through a very deliberative process. They've had, they've been trying to hear from town members, and it sounds like a lot of money, but once you get into wastewater and some of these projects, it's like dew before the sun. It's just amazing the amount of money that's coming in, but how an expansion of a wastewater system
We're voting on that this year in our town.
Yeah, I know you are, Colchester, and I think the proposal is to use that ARPA funding that went to towns as part of that funding.
Any money for the taxes, just on the users, and no tax increase. Yeah.
But I don't think the allocation the town got would begin to cover the total cost of that project, would it?
No, there's a bond also, but it would be paid back to the users, yes.
Yeah. So it does allow a lot, there's so many different things that it can be used for, but I think towns are trying to be very deliberative, and I know they speak highly of the support that was provided through the league and through the RPCs to help them with this. So I don't, do most of the towns have to vote on the use of those funds at town meeting? I'm not really sure procedurally.
They don't,
is that the plan?
No, Senator, they don't, the voters don't have to approve those expenditures. They would be, they would be in the budget that the voters approve. But there are some towns that are choosing to put projects before the voters.
Okay. So it's a matter of choice.
Yeah, and so something like a wastewater project, Montgomery, for instance, has been looking at a wastewater project for quite a few years. The voters would have to vote to approve the bond for that portion of the spending, right? And they're also voting this year on a local option tax to the proceeds of which would go toward that wastewater treatment facility.
That's in your district, Senator Ingalls?
Yes.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Franklin.
Montgomery and Richford. I have Montgomery and Richford, two Franklin County towns.
Yeah, they're both Franklin County.
Yeah.
At least for now.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? I'm going to be in Grand Isle before I'm done.
There you go. All right, come on down. Any other questions on this subject? So let me get this clear. You are asking for the increase of how much, the same as last year, which is what, 3 million, you said?
We're not putting a dollar figure on it, Senator.
Okay.
Anything that you could send our way would be very welcome.
$50 up. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
What's the agency's reaction? Have you had any opportunity to speak to them?
We have not spoken to the agency directly about this.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
I mean, I think the governor's recommend sort of speaks for itself at the funding levels, but at the same time, I think Karen and I have been sitting over the last month, sitting in, virtually via Zoom into your committee and to the House committee, and seeing the sobering reality of sort of the gap in funding and sort of meeting the match requirements and, where the funding levels are moving forward. So I think that's why Karen and I feel pretty strongly that we understand that you can't raise the continued, funding moving forward.
But you come back for the monies also. Is this a continuation of funding, or how does this work now? Or is it
we would see it as a one time. If there is flexibility in funding this go around, we would ask for that one-time funding.
One time.
It was one time last year.
It was one time last year, wasn't it?
It's always going to be one time because we know that changes moving forward, and that sort of being handcuffed is not politically,
Like-
Now, one time is two time.
Yeah,
Your time,
10
right?
time,
Yeah,
20 time.
I've been around long enough to know that when you put a tax on, there's a sunset. I've never seen a sunset yet. I've seen a sunrise, but I've never seen a
You know,
sunset yet on a tax.
The one thing that I do want to appreciate, and that is the recognition of the transportation fund, which we've been spending a lot of time on in terms of what that looks like and sort of the gap there. So you understand the fiscal reality that's out there.
We-
And front of-
Yeah. we
Although I know
absolutely-
that you've had your own ideas about increasing the gas tax and to generate monies, but that is probably
Well,
going to
that's a
happen.
declining revenue source in itself now. That's our problem. So we totally understand that, the difficulties there.
Senator Mensah.
Yes, go ahead.
So we do have Kevin Marcia here. I don't know if he's just listening in or if he wants to say anything about it from the agency's point of view.
Oh, go right ahead.
Good morning. Kevin Marshy, Record Director of Asset Management in the Highway Division for VTrans. I think actually Karen and Gwen answered pretty well in terms of what the agency's position is. Obviously, the governor's recommend does speak for itself. And as has been testified, I think many times our concern is that declining revenue, potentially declining revenue source, and the need to increase the amount of transportation funds that we have to actually match the funds that are coming in through the IIJA federal funding. I would say just, and it was mentioned the testimony yesterday in terms of the general fund bridge program, that is about $80 million that we're looking to dedicate at 100% federal funding. So that is essentially about over the life of the bill, about an $8 million savings to municipalities in terms of local match. So, and again, I think it was stated that is required. What is required in that specific provision of the bill is a minimum of 15% of the funding be leveraged at 100% federal funds. And as I testified yesterday, the number we're proposing is closer to 40% of that funding would match the off-system bridges at 100%. So we do recognize some of those stresses, and it was an opportunity for us to at least hopefully alleviate some of those pressures to the communities that would be impacted by that proposal.
I have one other, I'm sorry, Russ.
Go ahead.
Well, we're talking about T-fund here, which could be matched. Are there other ways, and in fact, we could leverage that dollar to get a bigger return? I mean, anything that's straight 100% T-fund has no leverage. Are there ways that in fact we could better use that money for match and somehow have a collateral benefit to towns?
But is that for me, Senator Kitchell?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you have the answer right now, but it
Yeah.
does, whenever you can leverage more dollars, and we're having trouble, obviously with the amount of money in the T fund. So the more we're able to use it for match as opposed dollar for dollar. And I know you've been doing more with highway maintenance and, different areas to help kind of generate or to help mitigate the sad shape of the T fund. But I was just wondering if this $3 million that, was done one time, in fact, if it was used for some activity that was subject to the federal match, in essence, could we do more with it and have some beneficial impact at the local level as well?
I mean, just kind of a quick response to that, and I'm sure there's more in depth in it. Certainly where we could go is, as an example is the Class 1 paving program. And again, I understand that the testimony from Karen and Gwen was, they talked a lot about Class 3 roads. That doesn't help the Class 3 roads, but it does, essentially help the municipalities. And the Town Highway Bridge Program is a place, and I think it's already been mentioned that there is an increase in the Town Highway Bridge Program. So, some of those funds, and I'm not speaking specifically to the $3 million, but the funds we're looking to leverage is, where we can in places like Class 1 town highways, Town Highway Bridge Programs, the match that goes into the bike and pedestrian programs as well. So those are some of the areas, and those are traditional areas that we fund where, there is an impact in terms of using those funds to leverage the federal funds for match. There's still a town match on many of those programs. However, it at least is you're seeing some increases in those programs, or I may say as well that also some sustained levels of funding in those programs that we may not have seen otherwise with IAJ. Not a comprehensive response, Senator Kitchell, but at least.
No, but I guess I'm asking the league to think about, that's one kind of a traditional way of going out, but in the end, there might be ways that create a greater benefit. So I'm just, kind of storming my brain in terms of how we use the state money and how we get the greatest return. So I throw that back to Gwen and Karen to think about, because it could mean if all of that determines or is based on whether in fact this is a grant we feel in light of the transportation plan can be accommodated. So I understand that, but I'm just throwing it out for, possible consideration.
In Senator Kitchell's left pocket, she's got billions of dollars. So, maybe she'll go in her left pocket.
It's like dew before the sun. Working lands, we just need 15 million. Well, we would like to keep the restaurant program going, and that was only 20 some odd million. And we would like to have.
She's got all the power. She's got all the
No,
power.
I have all the
Senator
requests.
Ingalls, go ahead.
And wasn't the $3 million that we sent to the towns because we suspended through COVID a first in, first out, or first request process, and some of those processes were in limbo, so that we gave the $3 million. I know in one of my towns in Orleans that they had a project on a bridge and they were kind of promised the money, but the money, the suspension of the program caused it so they weren't, but the $3 million covered that. Wasn't there a program where there was a pot of money?
There was a suspension during the first year of the pandemic of the grant programs, to the tune of 7 mil-ish. And then, so the last fiscal year, there was they filled those coffers back up to that 7 million plus that current year. So it's essentially doubled, even though it was, leveling where the funding was. And then on top of that, you appropriated $3 million. So that was that one-time funding that you found to add to the pot, but that wasn't associated with the suspension of those programs for that 1 year.
Okay. Thank you.
The questions? All right, good testimony, and we'll take it into consideration. But that's fine.
Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you.
Appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, let's take a 10-minute break. Is that all right?
Yeah, what time? Oh, 10:03. So
Yeah.
10:15.
10:15, we'll be back. Yep, okay.
All right.